Tonight on Let It Rip.
We're demanding an end to the shadow banning, a stop to the silencing.
He's back. Former President Donald Trump fighting a class action lawsuit against Google, Facebook, and Twitter, accusing them of illegally banning him from social media. Plus, tensions are rising over the issue of critical race theory, part of the difficult discussion about the long history of racism in America. But first,
I will be sitting down this week with Project Veritas to discuss the discrimination that CBS is enforcing upon its employees.
those words against the COVID vaccine got local weathercaster April Moss fired last month. Tonight, she tells us why she did it and what she plans to do next. Time to Let It Rip, beginning tonight with a woman some call courageous, but others call crazy. April Moss had worked at Detroit CBS station for 9 years until she decided in the middle of her weathercast to speak out against the COVID-19 vaccine. I asked her if she planned that or if she just spoke off the cuff.
I knew that I needed to go public, so I had thought about this for a few days leading up to it. But yeah, no, it definitely was not a spur of the moment thing. This is something that I had been in talks with HR at the company about for many weeks. And so I realized that the situation was not going to get handled internally. This was not going to be something that Viacom CBS was going to change on or waver on. And I really started to see a ripple effect happening across the country and really even here locally in Michigan, where many corporations are doing the same exact thing as Viacom CBS. Just, really putting the hammer down on wanting everyone to have vaccinations, and that if you weren't going to reveal your medical information to the company, that you would then be discriminated by being forced to be treated as if you were sick by wearing a mask, as well as taking weekly COVID tests, or you would not be allowed in the building, which was my case, where I basically said, listen, what's happening here with our company isn't right. And I submitted documentation written up by a lawyer to HR, and they basically said, well, these are still our policies, so you either comply or you're not allowed in our building anymore. So from my standpoint, I felt like this was something I needed to do, not just for myself, but on behalf of everyone who's in a situation where they're facing this medical tyranny in the workplace.
You were fired almost immediately, is that correct?
I was let go. I was let go for speaking out publicly on my station, and I was very much aware that that was going to happen prior to doing this. So that's why it was something that both my family and I had sat down and had a conversation about, to really make sure that we were counting the costs, but we knew that standing up and doing what we knew in our personal conviction to be the right thing ultimately was the right choice in the end, regardless of whether I lost my job or not.
And the story didn't end there. I understand that you started a GoFundMe page or account that is now generating money. How much money have you collected so far?
You're asking regarding the Give, Send, Go fund? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. The last time I checked, it was somewhere around 120,000. And, going into this was something that I'm so grateful to see that the American people are standing behind me and really wanting me to advocate on their behalf. So that is what, in the short term, at least I'm going to try to do. I'm meeting with many different organizations across the state to be able to try to bring a voice to those who don't have a public platform, so that we can, again, this is about choice. This is about medical freedom. So that's the immediate issue. And so, of course, those funds are helpful so that I can travel and be at the different speaking engagements that I need to be at to try to work on the behalf of the people.
We thank you for your time, and we wish you and your family the best of health and the best in terms of your future. And who knows what that future may hold. But we thank you for appearing tonight on Let It Rip. Time now to discuss what you just heard. With us right now, State Senator Adam Ollier of Detroit, a former federal prosecutor and judge and well-known expert in constitutional law. William Wagner is back, as is our expert in law, reporting and anchoring, Charlie Langton. But I want to begin tonight with a consultant and co-host of the No BS News Hour podcast, Karen Dumas, because April as we've seen, is a born-again conservative, but Karen is a lifelong liberal. But in this case, Karen, you agree with April. Why?
Well, I agree with April, not necessarily the method by which she delivered her opposition to her employer's encouraged request. But I certainly agree with her. I mean, we've got to look at, what employers are starting to do and wonder, just where does this stop in terms of this being any form of democracy or us having freedom of choice. So, yeah, I do agree with April. And I think she had a right and a responsibility to do what was best for her. And in this case, it was to leave.
But Adam, when I hear April refusing to get the vaccine, I can't help but worry about the 60% of Detroiters who are making that same choice. And I'm concerned about another spike in cases down the road. What about you?
I mean, we actually need every single person to get vaccinated. We need to do it as soon as possible. We need to do everything that we can to encourage. And every business that requires it from their employees is doing their best to make sure that we're safe. I mean, the reason we're doing this on Zoom is because everybody's not vaccinated. If everybody in the city of Detroit, if everybody in the state of Michigan, if everybody in the country were vaccinated, we'd be back in the studio. We'd be back doing all the things that we were accustomed to doing. And there'd be spectators at the Olympics. The reason we aren't back to normal is because people are being selfish. They are concerned that their health is more important than everyone else's. Getting vaccinated is not about your personal health. It is about protecting people around you. That's why we get vaccinated.
Meanwhile, Professor Wagner, it's still unclear how much power an employer has to force us to get the vaccine. The Henry Ford Health System says all 23,000 of its workers must get the shot. Trinity Health is doing the same. But is it different for a TV station in this case?
Well, it's the same in the sense that the Constitution only applies to government action, which is why the government, my good friend, the senator over there, doesn't want to have to, face this because they know that they would face constitutional challenges, forcing somebody to, submit to an assault and battery, which this is something the government can't do because they would be challenged as it being unconstitutional. When a private company does, you can contract that away and you can consent to that happening to you. And so, what matters is what's in the contract. There are nurses and physicians and other scientists and doctors throughout this country that haven't been vaccinated because they've got some very serious concerns, either about the science that's behind it and the long-term, effects of it, or because of the religious conscience and the fact that, aborted fetal tissues were involved in some part of the process in the making of the vaccine. And so there are legitimate reasons that people are not wanting to, get the vaccine. And this should be part of the marketplace of ideas. And yes, we've got a concern. We've got to, get to a place where everybody is safe, especially in the larger cities. But when it comes to private companies, whether it be a TV studio or a private hospital, they can make you do that. But at the same time, you got to look at the contract because the contract may say that you've got a right to do some things. And I don't know what her contract was. I don't know what the contract at these various hospitals state, but it's going to be interesting. This isn't over yet. This is going to be a discussion that's going to continue.
No question about it. Now, CBS has said that any suggestion that April was a victim of discrimination is, quote, completely false. A spokesperson for the station saying that the station respects the freedom of employees to have their own opinions, but would not allow them to use a newscast as a platform for sharing personal views. Now, Charlie, you also work for CBS. How and where do you draw the line?
I don't think this is a very difficult issue. She was hired to do the weather. She didn't do the weather. She got fired for not doing her job. Let's be real about this. It's got nothing to do with vaccines. It's got nothing to do with anything else. She was supposed to do the weather, and she just changed format all of a sudden. She made the weather forecast into Let It Rip, and CBS didn't like that. They fired her, and they can do it.
Well, look, I want to tell you guys that April knows that her weather forecasting career may be over. She has already become a media star in the conservative world. We hear that she is going to be the keynote speaker at this weekend's Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC, in Dallas, a day before Donald Trump. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, that's a transition that happens. I mean, this is something that she stood for. What she stood for aligned with this group. And so it only makes sense for them to pick her up. But, I think it's duly noted that the EEOC did, rule that employers can mandate that their employees get a vaccine, and they can also offer, incentives to do that. So, you know, I mean, she's landed in probably in a better place, a place of organization that supports her views, and a place where she can express her views without being penalized.
The problem is this has become a political issue. This shouldn't be political. Getting vaccines is about public health. It's about making sure people are safe. I have two little kids under 4. And we didn't let anybody see them until they had gotten their shots because that keeps them safe.
But you know what people should be more, you know what people should be more concerned about?
People are safe. Now you can say whatever you want about your own personal decisions and your own personal health, but at the moment where you are breathing on me and us and my grandmother and your kids, that's the place where we're in the space.
But what we should be more concerned about, because if the vaccine, or people who got the vaccine were so confident in its ability to protect, then it wouldn't matter if they were around somebody else who didn't have it. What we should be more concerned about are the safety and cleanliness practices that everybody embraced and immediately dropped the minute we thought we were opening up. Nobody's cleaning off baskets. People are walking around. Nobody's washing their hands. These are the things that kept us clean and safe that we've now all dropped out. So when everybody starts to get sick during the fall, it's not going to be because of those 140 million Americans that are not vaccinated. It's going to be because people who are vaccinated think they're invincible and have now stopped being clean and conscious.
Well, what April did, though,
I thought this about personal autonomy and personal bodily privacy. You know, all these medical things with, you know, if it was abortion and it was the preborn child whose safety we were concerned about, Senator, you'd be on the opposite end of this. You know, is this really about safety, or is it, you know, when it comes to politics, it's either about politics or it's not about politics. You know, this truly is about politics, but it's not the politics of the right playing games here. You know, truth is truth. And if this is about personal privacy and bodily privacy, which it is for most of these people that are choosing not to make this decision, then where's the left standing up for that bodily privacy here?
And it's still experimental. It still has not even been approved. Everybody that's getting the vaccine is participating in a trial right now. That's what people, I mean, let's just be honest about it. It took almost 20 years before the polio vaccine was determined to be effective and safe. So I think people that have,
but day one, it started saving lives.
People, not necessarily. You've got to read their heart issues. There are they're both sides of the story. People have a right to do what's best for them. They have a right to choose what's right for them. So, I mean,
no one's saying that they can't.
Well, yeah, but it's not. It's about politics and it's about money. That's what this is all about right now.
Absolutely, there's some of those concerns.
Look, there are certainly those concerns involved, but look, we got to end this right now. But panel, I am vaccinated and proud to tell the world that I'm vaccinated and proud to encourage any and everyone else to get the vaccine because I believe it has possibly saved my life and can possibly save yours as well. All right, it is your choice. I'm not going to force you to do it, but I will try to persuade you. All right, that's all the time we have with this segment. Up next, Donald Trump's new lawsuit against Google, Facebook, and Twitter, plus critical race theory. Why are so many people upset over something they don't even understand? Stay with us. More to come. Welcome back to Let It Rip. This week, Donald Trump filed a class action lawsuit against Google, Facebook, and Twitter, demanding that they reinstate his accounts. With us now is conservative author, minister, and founder of the Black Tea News, Christina Barr. Of course, we also have with us State Senator Jim Runstedt, the Republican from White Lake. You've already met Karen and Adam and Charlie. So, Christina, let's begin with you. The lawsuit says that Mark Zuckerberg is being unfair because he's keeping Donald Trump offline and off Facebook. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I do think there was obviously a bit of a coordinated effort after, the January 6th incident after his election. And some of the, it's not just Zuckerberg, but also like Twitter and other places. Trump has had some off the wall tweets before, but the tweets that they said got him kicked off were really bizarre, really low key. Like, I'm not going to the inauguration. So they said, oh, they're queuing people that they can attack. That's some severe mind reading like Twitter had going on there. So out of all the reasons why they could have kicked him off, I don't think they had good reason at the time. So is anything going to happen? I'm not sure, but I think he's got reason to complain a little bit.
Well, Jim, I don't know if you remember January 6th, where Donald Trump gave this impromptu video that he released to all of the networks saying that the protesters who assaulted the Capitol were special people. We love you. At the same time, a few days later, oh, I don't know who they are. I have no idea why they did that. But in truth, even Senator McConnell said that Donald Trump was partly responsible for what happened. So why should Trump be allowed back on Twitter, Facebook, or Google?
Well, if he said the people busting into the Capitol were special people, certainly that is absolutely wrong. But I think this issue absolutely transcends a single person. Gabby Gifford, I believe it was, Tulsi Gabbard, after she won the debate, and she was the highest search person trying to find information, social media shut her down, and they could say whatever they want. They did that because they didn't want her trending high. I had a colleague in the Senate who put his Senate announcement out that he was going to run from state rep, he's going to go into the Senate. And they pulled it on all of this, this nasty, rotten. There was nothing like that. They just pulled it. Hunter Biden, weeks before the election, when his catastrophe of his computer was produced, I believe it was New York Post, all social media pulled it down for 2 weeks. This is not one person. I have personally experienced this. Most people have. You post something and they find all kinds of fault with it, even if it has nothing to do with anything that's negative. But you look at what's going on with these companies. 99% of Twitter employees donate to the Democrat Party. 92% of Facebook's employees donate to the Democrat Party. Twitter's owner donates only to Democrats, and they try to put, we're all bipartisan, and this goes both ways. No, it doesn't. It's absolutely aimed at conservatives, not one person. It's aimed at conservatives across this nation. And I don't know whether it is going to take having a antitrust lawsuit, something to open it up where we get a voice in this nation that isn't censored.
Well, Adam, what's wrong with that? Google and Facebook and Twitter used to be the Wild Wild West. Boy, we sure had a lot of fun because we could say anything about anybody at any time. Do you want to go back to that?
God forbid we have a place where you can't just lie openly and it get elevated and lie and elevate. You notice you can't do that on this program. If you lie over and over and again, you won't get to come back because there are regulators that do that. And that's what Twitter and Facebook are starting to do. They're starting to say that consistently lying is unacceptable. That's why the president got blocked from those platforms, because he was lying over and over and over again and violating the terms of service. My colleague is talking about things that I don't know how anyone could know what the given history is of 92% or 95% of any levels of employees. Can't be done. Nobody has that kind of data. It's not out there. So as we talk about going forward, what these companies are doing, if conservatives feel like they're getting such a raw deal, they cannot use Twitter. They cannot use Facebook. They can use any other space. They can create all the other spaces that they want where they can continue to do the echo chambers that they want. But if we're talking about spaces that are more free and more open, like these social media companies are, they have to be places where you can't lie and you can't elevate those things, because those are risks to national security. We saw that with what happened with Russia, and we see that all across the world where people use social media to take down governments and to run all kinds of disservices. It's unacceptable, and we're not going to allow it to continue to happen in this country.
Well, Karen, you've got a podcast and you do a lot of things online. And frankly, you uncover a lot of truth online that many of us would not have known but for what we heard and read online. So where do you stand?
Well, this is the thing. One, why are we still talking about Donald Trump? I think he has the Baby Jane syndrome. He can't just let the limelight go. We need to move on. But the Communications Act of 1934 is a federal law that provides legal immunity to web platforms that moderate user-generated content. So, that's the reality. They can do that. People get on Facebook and Twitter and lie every day. I'm in Bahamas. I'm slim. I'm good looking. I've got 50 million admirers. So that's nothing new. If we're really concerned about how those platforms are used, there was a man walking across the street in New York who slit his throat. That was online. There was someone who threw firecrackers in an open car in California. That was online. We've seen people kill and shoot people online. Those things to me are far more dangerous. So, at the end of the day, these platforms can regulate who and what. They're normal people like us. We get put in, I've never been there, but in Facebook jail all the time. So this is the era that we live in right now. We don't have privacy, we don't have control, and we really don't have the freedoms that we pretend that we do.
Okay, I want to get to the second subject, and that is critical race theory. And Christina, I want to come back to you because I don't think people even understand what it is. This is an old theory, more than 40 years old, and there's such an uproar right now, such tension right now, but it's not being taught in any school in Metro Detroit. So why are so many people so angry?
Because the premise of it, well, everyone, please go watch Breonna Keller from CNN. They did a segment about this because they were making it seem like Republicans and parents were just, I don't know, hicks who didn't know any better. So they went to a teacher who does teach it, and she's a high school African-American teacher. And she also claimed that they don't teach it, but she said it's a lens, it's a worldview of how you teach. It started off with legal theory, but if you read critical race theory and introduction, unlike other disciplines of academia, it requires an activist element to it. So teachers, she admitted, can be biased from learning this. And she said that's a good thing because racism is in every institution of our country. So if you already are coming with that premise of that bias, then you're not teaching, it's not about teaching honest history. So please, I can't believe CNN aired it. As an editor, I would have never aired something like that because it did not prove their point, would make you more afraid. And their teachers unions are learning this. They're pushing for it. So if it's not going to be like you go to classroom, it says critical race theory 101, but the principles, I'm sure, have already eked through what kids are learning.
Well, Jim, I think many people just want to hear the truth, even if the truth is sometimes hard to hear. If our founding fathers wrote this document professing freedom and faith and yet denied that freedom to the slaves they held, there is hypocrisy in that document. Shouldn't the truth be told about what happened?
Absolutely, the truth should be told. When I was in school, it was told. All of those things are told. Here's a few things that were not told, okay? And critical race theory, they just changed the name. So we're not teaching that because we changed the name, ha, ha, ha. Here's what they're teaching, and it's coming here. In North Carolina, they had middle school students forced to stand up to the class and apologize to other students for their privilege. In Buffalo schools, they taught all the students that white people perpetuate systemic racism and are guilty of implicit racial bias. Elementary school in Manhattan sorted all the students by race and mandatory classroom exercises. Lastly, a head teacher in Manhattan was caught on tape acknowledging the curriculum for his school teaches white students are inherently evil and saying that they are demonizing white people for being born. Now, that wasn't being taught. That's new. They're getting this stuff into the schools. Is it happening in Michigan? Yes. Do they call it a different name? Say, oh, we're not teaching that. Yes. This is one of the most destructive, racist, horrific things in the most diverse society this world has ever known, the United States of America, where we need to come together. They're dividing students by race and hate like this nation has never seen, and it's got to stop.
Adam, have you heard that in the schools that you've seen?
No, what I hear in schools is that Black kids, like me, are disproportionately put out of school, that we are suspended at higher rates, that we are put into advanced placement classes at lower rates. When we talk about what is actually happening, if you look at it, it is racism. Our country has had racist issues from its founding. And we all know that. There's no disputing that. When we talk about the levels of equity, maybe just now are we even getting close to it? And that requires acceptance. We are not in a space where we are getting there. And when someone like my colleague can bring out 4 or 5 examples across the entire country, it just goes to show you how rare it is. But also, as you look at the systems, Black children in schools are disproportionately negatively impacted by the systems. That's what systemic racism is about. It's not about prejudice. Systems. It's not about some teacher or some person saying some racist thing. It is about systems that disproportionately make it more difficult for Black people to be successful, for brown people to be successful.
All right, guys, we're running out of time and we're only touching the surface of this subject. We will discuss it again. Much more to follow, and stay with us for final thoughts as Let It Rip continues. Final thoughts, not for everybody, but for Karen and Charlie. Karen, let's start with you.
I think this country needs to realistically come to terms with what it was and who it is now. Certainly, white people don't want to bear the burden of their ancestors, and Black people shouldn't bear the burden of slavery. Our history, Black history, didn't start with slavery. And I think we need to have a very candid conversation. I think people don't want to pull back that scab and look at the realities of what has contributed to what continues to be benefit for white people. And as Adam said, disproportionate discrimination for Black people. It's a tough conversation, but it's long overdue.
Charlie.
I think we've got to talk together. I think if white people and Black people can talk together, it's going to be amazing how many things we have in common. And I don't think we talk enough. And it doesn't have to be on these heavy duty issues like let it rip. It could be on anything. What do you like to eat? It's so easy. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it could be. And we have to start doing it now.
We have to try. Thank you, panel. And thank you for watching this edition of Let It Rip.